What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 1. Sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my quarterback stud for NFL Week 1 is Jalen Hurts from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Detroit Lions, who have the second worst defense overall, and they gave up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks last year. So Jalen Hurts, he averaged 21.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.3 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 10% owned, projected at 23 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's $6,800 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles favored by 4. So Jalen Hurts scored 18 and 13 fantasy points in his last 2 games last season. Not his best 2 performances to close it out, but he's got a fantastic matchup here in Week 1. And Jalen Hurts has A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert to throw the ball to. So he's got plenty of capable pass catchers. And I think he's going to be able to run the ball all over the Detroit Lions. So I like Jalen Hurts here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, so my sleeper pick for NFL Week 1 is Kirk Cousins from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Green Bay Packers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they gave up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks last year. Now, Kirk Cousins averaged 20.5 fantasy points per game on the season last year, only 1.8 rush attempts per game. He's going to be only about 4% owned, projected at 18.3 fantasy points here in Week 1. But he's only $6,100 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Vikings trailing by 1.5. So Kirk Cousins scored 22 and 20 fantasy points in his last 2 games last season. He was pretty consistent, scoring 20 plus fantasy points per game on the season last year. And he's still got Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, 2 fantastic weapons at the wide receiver position. So I like Kirk Cousins here versus the Green Bay Packers.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay guys, let's take a look at the running back position. So the super studs on the slate, Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry, both of them are in great matchups. Jonathan Taylor has a fantastic matchup versus the Houston Texans, who had the 3rd worst defense overall last year and gave up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. But if you want to save some salary on a stud that's in a great spot, take a look at Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 4th worst defense overall and gave up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Alvin Kamara has averaged 19 fantasy points per game on the season last year, and he got an average of 5.2 pass targets per game and 18.5 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 10% owned, projected at 17.6 fantasy points here in week 1. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game, with the Saints favored by 5.5. So Alvin Kamara scored 21, 21, and 8 fantasy points in his last 3 games of the season last year. But on his last game where he scored 21 fantasy points, he had 30 rush attempts and 2 pass targets. So this guy's capable of a ton of volume. He's got a fantastic matchup. So I like Alvin Kamara here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, let's take a look at my sleeper pick for the running back position. I like Josh Jacobs from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the LA Chargers, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They gave up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs last year. Josh Jacobs has averaged 15.6 fantasy points per game on the season last year. He got an average of 4.3 pass targets per game and 14.5 rush attempts per game. Now, Josh Jacobs is only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 12.7 fantasy points here in week 1. He's 6,300 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 52 points scored in this game, with the Raiders trailing by 3.5. So Josh Jacobs scored 17, 25, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games of the season last year, off of 13, 26, and 16 rush attempts, on top of 5, 2, and 4 pass targets. So he was getting a ton of volume to close out this season. So I like Josh Jacobs here versus the LA Chargers. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My wide receiver stud is Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Green Bay Packers, who had a middle-of-the-pack defense overall last year. They were middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Justin Jefferson averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 9.8 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 15% owned. He was on the field for 89% of the snaps last year, projected at 19.4 fantasy points here in week 1. He's 7,800 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Vikings trailing by 1.5. And Justin Jefferson scored 25, 12, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games of the season last year, off of 7, 11, and 12 pass targets. So I like Justin Jefferson here versus the Green Bay Packers.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, my sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They were middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Tyler Boyd averaged 11.7 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 5.9 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 4% owned, projected at 10.5 fantasy points here in week 1. He's only 4,800 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Bengals favored by 7.5. So Tyler Boyd was a consistent producer last year. Last 2 games not so great, but he scored 6, 4, and 13 fantasy points in his last 3 games last year off of 6, 3, and 5 pass targets, and he was on the field for 73% of the snaps. So I like Tyler Boyd here versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, let's take a look at the tight end position. So my tight end stud for NFL Week 1 is Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders, playing the LA Chargers, who had the 6th worst defense overall last year, and they gave up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 8.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 11% owned, projected at 13 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's $5,400 DraftKings salary, $1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 52 points scored in this game, with the Raiders trailing by 3.5. So fantastic matchup here for Darren Waller, who scored 15 fantasy points in his last game of the season off of 12 pass targets. So I like Darren Waller here versus the LA Chargers. Okay, my sleeper pick at the tight end position is TJ Hawkinson from the Detroit Lions, playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who had a middle-of-the-pack defense overall last year, but they gave up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. TJ Hawkinson averaged 12.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.9 pass targets per game. He was on the field for 78% of the snaps, and he's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's $4,900 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Lions trailing by 4. So great matchup for TJ Hawkinson. Now, there's 3 tight ends that I like, all around the same salary range between $4,500 to $5,400. You got Dallas Goedert at $4,500, who I think is a pretty nice value play for the Philadelphia Eagles. On the other side of the ball, you got TJ Hawkinson for the Detroit Lions at $4,900. And if you want to pay up, you got Darren Waller at $5,400. So I like all these guys, but I like TJ Hawkinson as a sleeper pick here versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite
Player for this NFL slate.
I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.